a mega project that brought together more than 100 countries across the world. Promises of new airports, highways and seaports, visions of creating the next Dubais and Singapores. But today, in many places, those promises lie broken. Projects stand incomplete, dreams have collapsed, and several nations are drowning in debt. This was China's grandest global initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, once hailed as the project of the century. Now it is often described as a geopolitical disaster, and the ones who suffered most were the poorer nations, sold dreams that never came true. So what went wrong? Why is a global superpower like China now facing such criticism? Welcome back, viewers. Today we revisit the story of the Belt and Road. In 2013, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. It was introduced as a modern Silk Road, a massive network of railways, highways, and ports to connect Asia, Africa, and Europe. The goal was clear: boost global development and place China firmly as the leader of a new world order. And soon, China poured in nearly $1.2 trillion. But here's the catch: these were not gifts or aid, they were loans. Loans given to countries that Western banks and the IMF considered too risky to touch. The truth slowly came to light. BRI was not only an infrastructure project, it was also a tool for China's economic and political agenda. China had an overflow of factories, workers, and engineers. At home, there weren't enough jobs. So the plan was simple: export this surplus to other countries while expanding China's global influence. Loans were handed out, Chinese companies were hired, Chinese workers were sent, and the benefits flowed back to China. But for many countries, this turned into what is now called debt trap diplomacy. The loans were so large that repayment was nearly impossible. In the end, nations had to hand over land and infrastructure to China. The most famous example is Sri Lanka. The government was promised that building a new port would transform the nation into a global hub like Dubai. But Sri Lanka already had a working port in Colombo. Still, China pushed them to borrow $1.3 billion for Hambantota Port, and the deal required Chinese companies to build it. When the port failed to attract traffic, Sri Lanka was unable to repay. By 2017, the country had no choice but to lease Hambantota Port to China for 99 years. All revenue now goes to China. Sri Lanka lost sovereignty over one of its most strategic assets. And Sri Lanka isn't alone. In Zambia, heavy borrowing from China pushed the country into crisis. By 2020, almost half of Zambia's debt was owed to Beijing. When the pandemic hit, copper exports collapsed and Zambia defaulted, sinking deeper into the debt trap. Across the Belt and Road, white elephant projects, costly but useless, began to appear. In Montenegro, a $1 billion highway deal with China led straight into financial disaster. In Sri Lanka, the $200 million Matala Rajapaksa International Airport turned into the world's emptiest airport, with elephants wandering on its runways. In Ecuador, a $2.6 billion dam developed over 17,000 cracks, sparking fears of collapse. And then there's Pakistan. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, was announced as a $60 billion game-changer. It promised power plants, jobs, and new infrastructure. But most projects stalled. Protests erupted as jobs never came, electricity shortages continued, and debt piled up. Today, Gwadar Port is under Chinese control, with 91% of its revenue going to China and just 9% to Pakistan. Even developed nations started pulling back. Italy, the only G7 country to join BRI, later admitted it was a mistake and withdrew. Other countries like Malaysia, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Nepal cancelled or renegotiated their projects. Meanwhile, the West responded with alternatives. The United States and Europe launched their own infrastructure plans, offering low-interest and transparent loans. Russia, isolated after its war in Ukraine, leaned heavily toward China through BRI, creating a new geopolitical alignment challenging US dominance. 10 years and trillions of dollars later, BRI is seen by many as one of the biggest foreign policy failures in modern times. Why? Because the project was never truly about development for others. It was about China's own interests, exporting its surplus capacity, securing resources, expanding power, and promoting its currency. Today, China is trying to rebrand it as BRI 2.0, with a focus on digital infrastructure, green energy, and sustainable projects. But the world has changed. Countries are more cautious. They demand results, not just promises. So what did China gain? It now controls or holds stakes in dozens of ports worldwide, a strategic advantage for trade and military reach. And if the network ever gets fully completed, it could connect 65% of the world's population. But for now, the Belt and Road stands as a warning, a project that promised prosperity but delivered broken dreams and heavy debt. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'll see you in the next video.